In the first case, we're diving into the mysterious story of the McStay family, 4 loved ones who vanished without a trace. Their disappearance shocked the nation and quickly became one of the most talked about cases in the United States. The story starts here. The McStay family, Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young sons, seemed to have it all. Joseph, 40, was a self-made businessman with a rapidly growing company. Summer, 43, devoted her days to caring for their children. Johnny, a bright and curious 4-year-old, and Joseph Jr., just 3, full of energy and wonder. This family led a life many would envy, a peaceful home, financial stability, and a future full of promise. Joseph McStay was the founder of a growing company called Earth Inspired Products. He built it from the ground up alongside 2 partners, Dan Cavanaugh and Charles Merritt, also known as Chase. Their business specialized in luxury water fountains, and each of them played a key role. Joseph was the creative mind designing the fountains. Charles was the craftsman bringing those designs to life. And Dan handled the digital side, managing the company's website and online presence. The company was a success, not just locally but internationally. It was expanding fast, and profits were climbing. What's important to know here is that Joseph had already built this business before marrying Summer. His future looked bright, maybe too bright for what was coming next. The McStay family had settled into a beautiful home in Fallbrook, California, a peaceful town where life moved slowly. They had just moved in at the end of 2009, ready to start a new chapter. As I mentioned, their life seemed calm and stable, ordinary in every way. But just 2 months later, on February 4th, 2010, everything changed. That was the day the McStay family disappeared, without warning and without a trace. What happened next would leave investigators and the entire nation completely baffled. Joseph's father, Patrick McStay, was the last person known to speak with him. That call happened on February 4th, 2010. According to Patrick, Joseph said he was preparing to leave for a business meeting at a restaurant and even mentioned which one. Later, his business partner, Chase, confirmed that the meeting was indeed supposed to take place just between the 2 of them. After that phone call, the McStay family vanished completely. No messages, no updates, no sign of life. Their sudden disappearance sent waves of fear through their relatives. Over the next few days, family members tried again and again to reach Joseph and Summer, but their calls went unanswered. No response came from Joseph. No response from Summer. It was as if the entire family had simply dissolved into thin air, leaving behind one haunting question: where had they gone? Susan, Joseph's mother, made another attempt to contact him, this time sending an email. She asked where he was, whether anything had happened, and even if he might be trying to escape from something. She promised that no matter what he was going through, she would support him. But as the days passed, there was still no response. Filled with worry and a sense of helplessness, Susan turned to her other son, Michael. She asked him to go to Joseph's home and see if he could uncover what was happening. What Michael discovered inside would only deepen the mystery even further. 9 days after the McStay family vanished, on February 13th, 2010, Joseph's brother, Michael, decided to check on their home himself. As he approached, he noticed something immediately. Every door to the house was locked tight. It was as if the home had been completely sealed, with no one coming in or out. Then his eyes fell on the driveway. The family car, Joseph's vehicle, was missing. The sight sent a chill down his spine. Consumed by worry and confusion, Michael made a bold move. He slipped carefully through a window, determined to find out what had really happened. But what awaited him inside was shocking. In the backyard, the family's 2 dogs were left alone, with no food or water. The kitchen was a scene of neglect, groceries left out of the fridge, now rotten and spoiled. The entire house seemed frozen in time, as if the family had walked out one moment and vanished the next. Everything in the house seemed to point to one chilling conclusion. The McStays hadn't been gone for just a few hours. They had been missing for days, and not by their own choice. Dogs left without food or water for days. Fresh groceries abandoned until they spoiled. This wasn't the behavior of any family leaving home voluntarily. Something dark had clearly occurred. For Michael, one realization hit hard. The McStays hadn't left of their own free will. They had either been running from something or something terrible had befallen them. There were only two possibilities, and neither offered any comfort. Despite the growing fear, Michael made a painful choice. He decided to wait a little longer before contacting the police, clinging to the hope that Joseph, Summer, and the children might walk through the door, or at least get in touch. But as hours stretched into days, that hope began to fade, slipping further and further away. 15 days after the McStay family vanished on February 19, 2010, police finally got the call, and the investigation officially began. Detectives acted fast, starting with a search of the family's home, looking for any clue to explain what had happened. But they found nothing. No blood, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle. To investigators, it appeared that no crime had taken place at all. And so, in those early days, they settled on one chilling assumption. The McStays had left their home willingly. Investigators began by combing through the family's phone records, focusing on the day they vanished. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Summer had a casual conversation with her sister. Joseph made a few routine calls. When police searched the house, they seized every computer and device, hoping for a clue. They examined them carefully, but came up empty. No strange messages. No signs of danger. Nothing unusual at all on February 4, 2010, the day the McStay family disappeared. Well, almost nothing. Internet history revealed something curious. Searches suggesting the family might have been planning a trip to Mexico. But had they really gone? No one could say for sure. And with no solid evidence of foul play, investigators still couldn't even confirm that a crime had occurred. Nearly 3 weeks later, the investigation took a significant turn. Security footage from a neighbor's home captured the McStay family's vehicle leaving their driveway on February 4, 2010, at exactly 7:47 p.m. Police quickly matched the license plate and obtained a warrant to search for the missing car. After the search alert went out, police finally located the McStay family's car. It had already been towed and placed in an impound lot. Investigators learned it had been left for days in the parking lot of a shopping center in San Isidro, just an hour and 10 minutes from a McStay home in Fallbrook. San Isidro sits right at the edge of the United States-Mexico border. The vehicle had been removed on February 8, only 4 days after the family vanished. With the car discovered so close to the United States-Mexico border, investigators began to suspect the McStay family might have crossed into Mexico. To test this theory, they headed to the San Isidro border crossing and examined the security footage. This particular crossing is one where travelers often pass through on foot. While reviewing the footage, investigators spotted something intriguing. A family, strikingly similar to the McStays, was seen walking across the border, right around the time they vanished. It seemed to support the growing theory the McStay family had crossed into Mexico voluntarily. That idea gained even more weight when police examined the computers taken from the home. Search history revealed queries about traveling to Mexico and crossing the border. And there was more. Summer, Joseph's wife, had even attempted to purchase a Spanish-language learning program. Piece by piece, it painted a picture of a family preparing for a trip, one they may have planned themselves. As mentioned earlier, investigators were convinced the McStay family had headed for Mexico, and they had several reasons for believing it. Their vehicle had been discovered abandoned near the United States-Mexico border. Surveillance cameras showed a family resembling them crossing on foot. Computer searches revealed detailed inquiries about traveling to Mexico and navigating the border. And Summer herself had shown interest in learning Spanish, the primary language spoken in Mexico and across much of Central America. All the signs pointed to a move south. But was it simply a planned trip or a desperate escape? And if they were running, what or who were they running from? What made the situation even more unsettling was the secrecy. The McStay family hadn't told a single friend or relative they were leaving. One day they were there, the next they were gone, suddenly, without warning, and under a cloud of mystery. When investigators presented their findings to the McStays' relatives, the response was immediate and unwavering. They flatly rejected the idea. In their eyes, the people on that border footage weren't Joseph, Summer, or the boys, not even close. They were certain of it. The McStay family's relatives had clear reasons for doubting the Mexico theory. The border footage was grainy and low quality, far too blurry to make a positive identification. The man's walk in the video didn't resemble Joseph's distinct stride. Joseph and Summer had repeatedly said they had no interest in visiting Mexico, believing it was unsafe. And perhaps most telling, it was impossible to imagine them vanishing without saying a word to their loved ones. For the McStay family's relatives, the idea of a voluntary trip to Mexico made no sense. Their objections shattered the theory completely. With no other solid leads, the investigation essentially returned to square one. And for the next 4 years, the case remained cold. Nothing new emerged, and the mystery of the McStay family persisted. 4 years later, on November 11, 2013, San Bernardino police received a call from a motorcyclist riding through California's Mojave Desert. He had stumbled upon a fragment of a human skull. Officers rushed to the scene and made a grim discovery: 2 shallow graves. Each contained the remains of an adult and a child. DNA testing brought devastating confirmation. The remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young boys, ending years of uncertainty for their loved ones, but revealing a horrifying truth. The coroner's report confirmed the unimaginable. Each member of the McStay family had been struck in the head with a heavy object, causing fatal skull fractures. Then police uncovered the murder weapon, hidden in one of the graves, a hammer. It was clear. This was no tragic accident. This was deliberate, cold-blooded murder. Police struggled to find any fingerprints or DNA on the bodies or the murder weapon. The years in the desert's scorching heat had erased almost every trace of the crime. The only lead they uncovered was a set of tire tracks near the graves, most likely left by the killer's vehicle. Investigators also observed that the bodies had been wrapped in blankets. This suggested the horrifying possibility that the family had been killed inside their own home, bundled in household fabrics, and then transported by car to the desert. In other words, they hadn't been moved alive. It was a compelling theory, though not yet confirmed. The investigation was reignited. Police expanded their search, desperate for any new leads that might point to the killer. They re-examined the family's car, the same vehicle abandoned in that odd, suspicious location. Detectives also interviewed relatives and close friends, probing for anyone who might have had a motive. In the end, all family members were cleared of suspicion. This narrowed the focus to those closest to Joseph's professional life, his 2 business partners, Dan Kavanaugh and Charles Chase Merritt. Dan Kavanaugh managed the company's website, keeping it running and updated. When police reviewed Joseph's emails, they discovered exchanges between him and Dan that revealed a strained relationship. Dan had repeatedly complained about not being paid for his work and even threatened to shut down the website if he didn't receive his money. When questioned, Dan downplayed everything, insisting these were just ordinary workplace disagreements and denying any serious threats. He also provided solid evidence that he wasn't in California when the McStay family disappeared. Because of this, Dan was never arrested and was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. As mentioned earlier, the family's car had initially drawn attention because it was found in a suspicious location near the border. But the inspection at the time wasn't thorough for a couple of key reasons. First, when the car was discovered, police were focused entirely on locating the family rather than conducting a detailed examination of the vehicle. Second, investigators initially believed the McStays had left voluntarily. They assumed the car's location wasn't linked to a crime, so a close inspection wasn't seen as urgent, and few clues were collected. After the bodies were discovered, the car had to be examined again, this time with far more scrutiny. There were several compelling reasons for this. If the family hadn't gone to Mexico, how did their car end up so close to the border? Someone else must have driven it there. And if the murders occurred at the McStay home, the killer could have used the car to transport the bodies. The vehicle might contain crucial evidence pointing directly to the murderer. A deeper forensic examination of the car revealed critical new evidence. Investigators found DNA that didn't match any member of the McStay family. It belonged to someone in their inner circle, Charles Merritt, Joseph's business partner. This breakthrough immediately put Charles in the spotlight as the main suspect. Charles told both police and the media that he was close to the McStay family and a good friend of Joseph. He explained that they often met at restaurants and claimed that his DNA being in the car was completely normal because of their friendship. He denied any involvement in the disappearance or murder. Yet he admitted one unsettling detail: he was the last person to see Joseph alive. He even confirmed this on a national television broadcast. The investigation intensified around Charles, the prime suspect, especially as new details emerged about his true relationship with Joseph. Their connection was far from friendly. Joseph viewed Charles as a burden, both personally and professionally. He had discovered that Charles had been manipulating the company's accounts to line his own pockets. Summer, Joseph's wife, distrusted Charles because of his shady character and criminal history, which included time in jail for theft and robbery. Charles struggled with a gambling addiction, willing to do almost anything to get money. He owed Joseph a significant sum, sparking frequent arguments between them. On top of that, Charles had accumulated large debts at multiple casinos. These facts revealed a strained, contentious relationship between Joseph and Charles, marked by constant arguments. Most disputes revolved around the money Charles owed Joseph. Adding to the tension, Charles had been tampering with the company's accounts, creating even more conflict. Investigators also discovered that, after the McStay family vanished, Charles had transferred large sums of money from the company into his own account, even going so far as to forge Joseph's signature. Another critical clue came from Charles's phone records. They revealed that he had repeatedly visited the area where the bodies were later found during the family's disappearance. Police found this extremely suspicious. They suspected Charles had gone there to bury the bodies and conceal the evidence. There seemed to be no other reason for him to be in that remote location so frequently. Charles Merritt was arrested on November 5, 2014. Even with a mountain of evidence against him, he continued to deny any involvement in the murders of the McStay family. He claimed he had nothing to do with their disappearance, but investigators didn't believe him. Despite his denials, the police and prosecutors pressed on. They gathered all the evidence and prepared to take him to court, determined to see justice served for Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young boys. Police were confident they had enough evidence to convict Charles Merritt. The case against him included several damning points. His DNA was found inside the McStay family's car. Phone records showed he repeatedly visited the desert area where the bodies were buried during the time the family was missing. He had a strong motive. Joseph had caught him stealing money from their company and was planning to report him to police. The 2 men had been fighting constantly over money. Tire tracks at the burial site matched Charles's vehicle perfectly. Based on the evidence, police pieced together their version of events. Charles Merritt had been stealing from a company. When Joseph McStay discovered this, he threatened to fire Charles and report him to the police. Faced with losing everything and possibly going to prison, Charles decided to silence Joseph permanently. On February 4, 2010, Charles met Joseph at a restaurant during the day. Later that evening, investigators believe he went to McStay home, murdered Joseph, Summer, and their 2 boys with a hammer, and then drove their bodies deep into the desert, where he buried them in shallow graves. During this period, Charles went back to the McStay family's home and used one of their computers to search for information about traveling to Mexico, an attempt to mislead investigators. He then drove the family's car to a location near the United States-Mexico border, trying to create the impression that they had voluntarily left for Mexico. According to the police, this is what happened based on the evidence. However, Charles Merritt never admitted to the crime. Charles was arrested in November 2014, but his trial wouldn't begin until January 2019. The long wait was the result of his lawyers repeatedly requesting postponements. His lawyers presented 3 main arguments. First, they claimed the case was highly complex and that the evidence was too weak, based mostly on assumptions that required further examination. Second, they argued that investigators had overlooked other possible explanations. Third, they suggested that another person could have been involved. To challenge the accusations, Charles's defense put forward these arguments. Finding his DNA in the McStay family's car was not unusual, as he had a close relationship with them. The presence of his phone at certain locations did not necessarily prove he was physically there. Financial disputes alone were not a strong enough motive for murder. None of Charles's DNA was discovered at the burial site or on the suspected murder weapon. No witnesses came forward to directly link him to the crime. In June 2019, the jury found Charles Merritt guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of the entire McStay family. Several months later, in January 2020, he was sentenced to death. The court determined that he acted alone and that greed was the driving motive behind the murders. The disappearance of the McStay family quickly became a widely discussed public story, sparking intense debate and attracting major media attention across the United States. People closely followed the case, examining the evidence presented by police and the outcome in court. Some argued that the proof against Charles Merritt was weak or unclear, offering alternative explanations that aligned with the defense's claims and casting doubt on the verdict. In the end, opinions remain divided. Some are convinced the case is closed, while others believe it is still shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions. And you, what do you think about this case? Is Charles Merritt the killer, or could it be someone else? Was the evidence strong and enough to convict him? Do you have any other ideas about what happened to the McStay family? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. In the second case, we're uncovering a heartbreaking story about the Powell family, an American family whose lives took a dark and shocking turn. Their case became a tangled and mysterious affair that grabbed nationwide attention, and it's still unfolding in the courts today. The Powell family lived a peaceful and stable life, surrounded by calm and security. But then something terrible happened, something that shattered their world and turned their lives upside down. Keep watching the video to uncover the full story. In the heart of Akron, Ohio, the Powell family seemed to live a picture-perfect life. There was Steve, the father, Brenda, the mother, their eldest daughter Sydney, and her younger brother, four family members bound together by love and understanding. Steve and Brenda dedicated their lives to giving their children stability, comfort, and constant support, hoping to see them build a bright and successful future. But behind this calm and peaceful image, the threads of a darker story were quietly forming. A story centered on Brenda and her daughter Sydney, one that would soon take a shocking and tragic turn. Brenda Powell, in her 50s, grew up in a close-knit and loving family, an upbringing that shaped her gentle personality and her constant desire to help others. After finishing high school, she enrolled at the University of Akron, choosing to study childcare, driven by her passion for giving and supporting those in need. Following her graduation, she began working at a children's hospital in her hometown, where she quickly proved her dedication and compassion. Brenda earned the admiration of her colleagues and the trust of the many families she cared for. In her personal life, Brenda married Steve in 1995 when she was just 26 years old. Together, they began building the family she had always dreamed of, one filled with stability, love, and happiness. Sydney Powell, the eldest daughter of the Powell family, was known for her wisdom and lively spirit, always relying on her parents' support at every step she took. She shared a close and healthy bond with her mother, a relationship built on trust, love, and mutual understanding. Her academic success was a source of immense glory for her parents, who saw her as a shining example of dedication and achievement. After graduating from high school, Sydney enrolled at the University of Mount Union to continue her academic journey. But things didn't go as she had hoped. Challenges soon arose, and they would change the course of her life in ways no one could have imagined. Life in the Powell household moved along in peace and stability until the spring of 2020. That season carried with it the first winds of worry and doubt, slowly creeping into the heart of the family and reshaping the bonds that once held them together. By late February, while Steve was busy with his usual work routine, he noticed something unusual. The monthly tuition payment for Sydney's university had not been withdrawn from his bank account as it normally was. Concern started to show on his face. He tried logging into Sydney's university account to find out what was happening, but he couldn't access the information. Little by little, unease began to take root in his heart, signaling the beginning of an unexpected change in the quiet life of the Powell family. Steve's concern grew as the hours passed, so he decided to call Sydney directly to understand what was going on. Her response was calm, as she tried to reassure him that it was nothing serious, just a technical glitch in the university system. She promised to handle it herself, to look into the details and get the issue resolved. Only a few days later, while Steve was busy at work, he received an unexpected phone call from one of Sydney's college administrators. The administrator informed him that his daughter was no longer enrolled, that she had been dismissed from a university. Shocked, Steve tried to ask for more details, but the reply was brief. "Talk to your daughter. She knows more about it." For a moment, silence overtook him. The weight of the news hit hard, and he could hardly believe what he had just heard. Never had he imagined facing a situation like this. The college's call came while Sydney was actually at home, a detail Steve discovered through the family's GPS tracking app. Without hesitation, he decided to head back right away, determined to uncover the truth behind her sudden withdrawal from school. It took Steve no more than 15 minutes to return home, where he confronted his daughter directly, demanding the truth she seemed to be hiding. Sydney explained that she had simply gone through a difficult period academically, but insisted she hadn't dropped out, as people might think. She told her father that she was still living in the campus dorms, but had reduced her course load, switching to part-time status instead. Steve couldn't hide his surprise that his daughter had kept this from him for so long, especially since he had always believed her academic life was running smoothly, just as it used to. He reminded Sydney that hiding such things from him and her mother was never the right choice. Facing problems, no matter how difficult they may be, is always better than staying silent. Steve assured her that both he and Brenda would always stand by her side, ready to support and help her through whatever challenges she faced. Immediately after his conversation with Sydney, Steve called his wife Brenda, who was finishing up her shift at the hospital and heading home. He informed her that their daughter was facing some difficulties that were affecting her studies and asked Brenda to talk to Sydney about it. Steve believed that this would help Sydney overcome her problems, given the strong bond she shared with her mother. Once the call ended, Steve left the house and headed to work. Sydney's interruption in her studies plunged her mother, Brenda, into a spiral of worry. Concerned, she decided to contact the university herself to get some answers. However, Brenda couldn't speak directly with the administrator, who was in a meeting at the time of her call. All she received was a message from a university, informing her that someone would get back to her later. Brenda arrived home weighed down by worry, and as soon as she saw Sydney, a conversation immediately sparked between them. But the calm quickly dissolved, turning into a heated argument with raised voices. In the midst of the tension, Brenda's phone rang. It was the college administrator calling. She answered the call, but her attention remained focused on the ongoing confrontation with her daughter. On the other end of the line, the administrator and his assistant could clearly hear the shouting and heated argument between mother and daughter. Suddenly, the call was cut off, leaving the college staff worried and wondering what was happening inside the Powell household. The administrator tried calling Brenda again, but the phone kept ringing with no answer. On the third attempt, someone finally picked up. It was Sydney. In a deliberately calm voice, she said, "This is Brenda. Everything is fine." But the administrator wasn't fooled. Firmly, he responded, "That's not Brenda's voice. It's you, Sydney." Seconds later, the call dropped again, leaving the situation even more mysterious and suspicious. Faced with this mystery and growing concern, the college administrator tried calling Brenda multiple times, but there was no answer. Worried by the unusual situation, he decided to contact the police to go to the Powell family home and find out what was happening. The officers obtained the address from the administrator and headed straight to the Powell residence. At 1 p.m., the police arrived at the Powell residence before Steve had returned home. Upon entering, they were met with a shocking scene. Sydney was in a hysterical state, screaming uncontrollably, her face a mix of panic and disbelief, and her clothes stained with blood. Nearby, they found Brenda lying on the floor, covered in blood. Paramedics were called immediately, and when they arrived, they found Brenda still alive, but critically injured. She was rushed to the hospital, but her heart stopped upon arrival, and she tragically passed away at the age of 50. At the same time, a specialized mental health unit took custody of Sydney, who was deeply traumatized by the horrifying scene. Once Sydney had calmed down slightly under the supervision of the mental health team, investigators began questioning her to find out what had happened. However, she didn't provide many details. She only said that she had been at home with her mother when they heard a strange noise. She added that her mother had told her to leave the house immediately, which she did. According to her account, while she was outside, an unknown person entered the home and killed her mother. Sydney added that when she returned to the house, she was confronted with a shocking sight, her mother lying on the floor, covered in blood, with a kitchen knife nearby still showing clear signs of the attack. When the police examined the Powell family home, they noticed that some of the windows were broken, adding an atmosphere of violence and chaos to the scene. As they inspected the house further, they discovered that Brenda had been struck hard on the head with a frying pan, and then had received around 30 stab wounds to her neck with a kitchen knife. What puzzled the police was the extreme nature of the violence in the crime. They wondered, why would the perpetrator stab Brenda around 30 times in the neck when the first blow with the frying pan was already enough to end her life? This behavior didn't fit the theory of a robbery or burglary, suggesting instead that the crime had other dimensions, perhaps a personal revenge or a hidden emotional motive. Moreover, the officers considered that inflicting 30 stab wounds on Brenda was excessive, especially since she had been known for a kind and friendly personality, both with her colleagues and the patients she cared for at the hospital. Therefore, it seemed highly unlikely that she had enemies who could commit such a brutal act out of hatred or revenge. The police continued to examine every corner of the house, and they found that nothing had been stolen. They also noticed blood on the broken glass, indicating that the windows had been shattered after the crime took place. As the investigation continued and the on-site examination concluded, the theory that a stranger had entered the house and committed the crime began to weaken. On the other hand, suspicion around Sydney grew, especially after the testimony of the college administrator and his assistant. Combined with her contradictory statements and confused answers, the police became convinced that she hadn't revealed everything she knew and was still hiding important details about the incident. Sydney hadn't only been hiding what happened inside the house, and to her mother, she had also kept from her family the struggles and challenges she was facing at university. These personal secrets added a new dimension to understanding her actions and behavior during that period. Now let's take a closer look at Sydney's college experience. After her remarkable success and outstanding achievements in high school, Sydney's university journey wasn't as smooth. At the age of 19, she faced numerous challenges that prevented her from achieving satisfactory results. Given this difficult situation, the university officials advised her to switch to a less demanding major that would better suit her skills and abilities. However, Sydney completely refused to follow their recommendation. During her second year at university, despite her efforts and hard work, Sydney's situation worsened, and things became increasingly complicated for her. This led the university administration to inform her that she would not be able to continue her studies for the second semester of the academic year. They also told Sydney that in order to continue, she would need to switch to another program, since she had not succeeded in her current major, and they gave her a deadline to make this decision. However, Sydney refused these decisions outright, rejecting them completely. Failure was a harsh shock for Sydney, who had always been at the top. She couldn't accept the idea of stumbling, so she chose to hide the truth behind a mask of success. In front of her friends and family, she acted as if everything was going smoothly, while the reality was completely different. She even continued attending some classes and staying in the campus dorms, just to give the illusion that she was still on the path to excellence. Sydney's university troubles didn't stop there. At the end of 2019, she received shocking news, a letter from the college administration informing her of her final dismissal from the college, as well as her eviction from the campus dorms. Faced with the college's decisions, Sydney responded with a kind of forced denial, wanting to protect her reputation and image among her peers. She continued to keep the matter hidden from everyone and took several actions to maintain the illusion, including pretending she was still a student at the college, continuing to participate in various university activities, remaining in the campus dorms, Sydney took advantage of the fact that such decisions were not enforced immediately, as they were accompanied by several administrative procedures. In addition, there were deadlines for either implementing the decision or filing an appeal. As Sydney later explained, she used this period to continue attending the college as usual and to remain in the campus dorms. But in early February 2020, after the allotted time had passed, Sydney was summoned by the college administration. The college director informed her of the final decision to dismiss her, which meant she had to leave the campus dorms immediately. The director also suggested that she tell her parents about the situation, but Sydney asked him not to, giving excuses such as family problems. She realized that if her parents found out about her academic failure, it would be a huge shock for them. Faced with this situation, Sydney found no other way out but to make up an excuse for her classmates. She told them that she would leave the dorms and return to her family home, adding that she would take a temporary break from her studies. In reality, this was just a cover to justify her absence from a university, hide her big secret, and avoid any suspicious looks or embarrassment that could reveal what she was going through. Additionally, fearing that the truth might be revealed to her parents, Sydney came up with a new tactic. She began spending her nights in hotels until the spring break approached. Then she returned home, pretending to feel nostalgic, and told her parents that she preferred to stay with them rather than travel or spend the break with her university friends. Her words made the family feel proud and happy, unaware that what they heard was just a veil hiding a darker reality and the beginning of a dangerous downward spiral in their daughter's life. Sydney, who had once been the model of a successful and high-achieving high school student, now found herself lost and mentally and emotionally shattered due to all these pressures and problems. What made matters even more complicated was the bitter internal struggle she faced. How could she tell her parents the truth? She knew that confessing would shatter their hopes in her and drown them in a deep disappointment, something she never imagined she would cause. All of this happened to Sydney before she returned home, the return that witnessed the tragic assault on her mother and her death. Furthermore, everything that had happened to Sydney at university eventually came to the attention of the police. Before we continue, we'd really appreciate your support. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give this video a like. Now, let's get back to the story. As mentioned earlier, the theory that a burglar had broken into the Powell family home and committed the crime became weak and unlikely for several reasons. Sydney's contradictory and confused statements during the investigation strengthened suspicions of her involvement. The broken glass in the house was shattered from the inside, indicating that no external party had entered during the crime. The weapon used was not brought from outside. It was a kitchen knife from the family home, used to attack the mother. Suspicion increasingly turned towards Sydney as the prime suspect, especially after it was reinforced by the college administrator's testimony, which confirmed that a heated argument had occurred between Sydney and her mother. It is believed that the psychological pressure from her poor academic results and her dismissal from the college contributed to the rising tension between her and her mother. For the Powell family relatives, their first shock was Brenda's murder, and the second was the accusation and arrest of Sydney. They rejected all charges against Sydney and demanded a mental health evaluation. As for Stephen Powell, despite his shock and grief over losing his wife Brenda, he stood by his daughter Sydney and supported her. He also posted a $250,000 bail, which led to Sydney being released and tried while out on bail. After her release, Sydney stayed at her maternal grandmother's house for 2 years. During this period, her mental health was closely monitored by several psychological specialists. In 2022, when Sydney turned 21, her trial officially began. Sydney defended herself, claiming she was not guilty due to her mental and psychological disorders. However, the prosecutor argued that Sydney was not insane and was merely pretending to have a mental illness, adding that she fully knew what she was doing. The prosecutor supported his argument by stating that Sydney had previously tried to cover up her crime by breaking the window glass in order to make others believe that an unknown third party was responsible for Brenda's murder. According to him, this clearly indicated that Sydney was fully aware that what she did was wrong. In the same context, the prosecutor added that during the events, her father called her before returning home, asking what was going on. Sydney calmly reassured him that everything was fine. When he asked to speak with Brenda, she told him that her mother was busy talking with the college administrator. In reality, she had just finished attacking her mother, the prosecutor claimed. According to the prosecutor, during that call, Sydney realized that the police were on their way to the house. She then tried to hide the evidence of the crime she had committed by breaking the window glass, so that everyone would believe, as previously mentioned, that someone else had entered the house and committed the murder. The prosecutor argued that Sydney's repeated utterance of the phrase, "get out of the house," when she was taken to the hospital was an attempt to pretend she had been shocked by an intruder. He reminded everyone of the autopsy results for Brenda, which showed that Sydney knew exactly what she was doing. All the blows and stabs were precise, indicating, in the prosecutor's view, a deliberate intent to kill. In addition, the knife wounds on Brenda's hands proved that she had tried to defend herself against her daughter. The prosecutor added that lying, hiding the truth, and trying to frame someone else are all signs that a person understands their actions are wrong. In other words, he can clearly distinguish right from wrong, and therefore he are responsible for their actions. For Sydney's defense, several experts were brought in to discuss her mental and psychological health. They pointed out that 3 psychologists confirmed that Sydney was suffering from a form of schizophrenia. They also noted that she had experienced a severe episode of mental disturbance, essentially losing all ability to perceive and distinguish right from wrong, on the day of the incident. The psychologist who had been monitoring Sydney since the crime stated that she had gone through a severe psychotic episode which indicated her struggle with schizophrenia. He also mentioned that Sydney had suffered several concussions from playing sports, which further worsened her mental health. Additionally, she had been experiencing hallucinations shortly before the crime. As for Sydney herself, she claimed that she did not remember the attack. All she recalled was sitting on the couch with her mother, and later being at the hospital after the incident. On the other hand, mental health experts added that the early signs of Sydney's condition appeared during her high school years, based on the testimony of one of her teachers. The teacher stated that, specifically during Sydney's final year in one class, she was calm at first but suddenly broke into a hysterical crying fit, showing signs of panic and fear. He explained that Sydney suddenly could no longer see numbers. This occurred just before she was about to take a test. As for Sydney's lawyers, they argued that their client could not handle the pressures of college life, which worsened her mental and psychological condition. They maintained that the crime was committed while Sydney was in a state of hysteria and unconsciousness. At the conclusion of the trial, the prosecutor emphasized in his final argument that Sydney was fully aware of her actions on the day of the crime. He stated that she knew the gravity of what she was doing, which explained her attempts to hide the evidence and mislead the police. He added that neither stress nor hallucinations influenced her behavior. The prosecutor also noted that, under United States law, anyone who can distinguish right from wrong is criminally responsible for their actions, and Sydney was clearly able to do so during the crime. On the other hand, Stephen Powell insisted that his daughter did not need a trial or punishment, but treatment. He added that his late wife Brenda would never have wanted her daughter to go to prison. After 3 days of deliberation, on September 20th, 2023, the jury found Sydney guilty of murder, criminal assault, and attempting to tamper with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years, as a preliminary verdict. The jury concluded that Sydney was fully aware of her actions during the crime and was not under the influence of hallucinations, schizophrenia, or any other mental disorder. The case did not end there. Sydney's defense team appealed the verdict, and in December 2024, the appellate court overturned the original ruling and ordered a retrial. The court justified this decision by noting that the defense had been denied the right to present a rebuttal after the prosecution expert's testimony, which was considered a violation of Sydney's right to a fair trial. This decision was opposed by the prosecution, who appealed to the Ohio Supreme Court, while the defense also rejected it, continuing to demand Sydney's acquittal and the dismissal of all charges against her. As of now, the case is still under review by the Ohio Supreme Court, and no date has been set for the appeal hearing. This appeal could either uphold the appellate court's ruling or overturn it, leading to a retrial, while Sydney remains in custody. What do you think about the story and the case that stemmed from it? Was the initial verdict against Sydney fair or unjust? Do you think Sydney deserves prison time, or should she receive psychological and psychiatric treatment instead? Share your opinions in the comments below. On a quiet summer day in London, a 14-year-old girl went out for her usual walk. She had no idea that this day would become a tragic turning point in her life and in the lives of everyone around her. That girl was Alice Gross. Her sudden disappearance triggered one of the largest search operations in London's history. Today, we're diving deep into Alice's story, step by step, to uncover every clue, every shadow of doubt, and every event that turned this disappearance into a case that shook the entire nation. Today's story revolves around Alice Gross, the British girl born on February 14, 2000, in Hanwell, West London. Alice lived a peaceful and stable life with her parents, Rosalind and Jose, and her older sister Nina. She was kind, cheerful, and loved by everyone around her. On the other hand, Alice was energetic and full of talents and hobbies, especially in art and design. She loved creating her own clothes and was so passionate that she even designed her own graduation dress years in advance. At the age of 13, Alice was diagnosed with anorexia and depression. As a result, she became very thin, weak, and sometimes prone to fainting. Her family was understandably worried and sought medical treatment for her. But despite these challenges, Alice never lost her smile. Her illness didn't stop her from enjoying her hobbies or her life, and it certainly didn't dampen her determination to succeed academically. On August 28, 2014, during her summer break, Alice left home around 4 p.m. for a walk in nature, telling her mother she would be back by 7 p.m. Alice was known for always being punctual. Her walk was a usual one, following the same route she took on all her outings. She walked along the River Brent, following the Grand Union Canal, starting from Hanwell and heading towards Brentford. During her usual stroll, Alice sent a text to her father, letting him know she was on her way home and wouldn't be late. But when the expected time came, Alice never returned. Her parents' worry quickly turned into panic as she failed to come back. With growing worry, Alice's parents, Jose and Rosalind, took several steps. First, they called Alice multiple times, but there was no answer. They assumed either her phone was turned off or the battery had died, with the latter seeming more likely. Second, they reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and friends to see if anyone had seen her, but no one had. Third, with no other options left, the parents contacted the police, fearing that Alice might have been harmed or that her illness could have caused her to lose consciousness. The police arrived at the Gross family home and, after learning about Alice's usual walking route, began the search alongside her family, relatives, and friends. Unfortunately, the initial search yielded no results. Alice was nowhere to be found, and there were no clues about her whereabouts. This led the local police to issue an official statement. They also started sharing Alice's photos and information about her disappearance through local media, including newspapers, radio, and online news sites, urging anyone who had seen her to come forward. In addition, several major British newspapers and other media outlets covered Alice's story, which helped the case spread like wildfire, making countless people aware of her disappearance. Alongside traditional media coverage, news of Alice Gross's disappearance went viral on social media, with the hashtag #FindAlice circulating widely along with her photos. Family members also made heartfelt appeals, asking Alice to return home if her disappearance was voluntary, and urging anyone with information to contact the police. These efforts proved crucial, as a large number of citizens came forward with tips and reports. Moreover, thousands of volunteers joined the police in intensifying the search, working tirelessly day and night to locate Alice. As mentioned earlier, the local police received numerous tips after news of Alice's disappearance spread widely. The people who came forward reported that they had seen Alice. Using this information, the police were able to track down relevant CCTV footage, which confirmed these sightings. According to CCTV footage, several details were established. First, Alice was seen at 3:45 p.m. near Brentford Lock. Second, she was spotted again just before 4 p.m., walking along the Grand Union Canal. Third, her last sighting was at 4:26 p.m. as she walked along the lower canal path known as Trump's Way. Fourth, the route captured on camera showed her heading back home toward Hanwell. Fifth, Alice was seen carrying a purple backpack. The search for Alice continued relentlessly. Meanwhile, the police carried out additional measures alongside the search, such as reenacting Alice's final moments and the route she took before her disappearance. They used an actress similar in age, size, and clothing to Alice, aiming to jog people's memories and gather any useful information. Displaying photos of cyclists who had passed by the location where Alice was last seen in an attempt to identify them and obtain any relevant information. The intensive search and other measures began to yield results. On September 4, 2014, Alice's backpack was found on a pedestrian path near the River Brent, almost a week after her last sighting. When police searched the backpack, they found the shoes she had been wearing, but her phone was nowhere to be found. The area where Alice's backpack was discovered became the main focus of the search, with police also scouring the surrounding areas. Additionally, the police released CCTV footage to the public, clearly showing Alice with her backpack and shoes, and her discovery was reported in the news. The aim was to appeal to witnesses who might have seen the backpack, hoping to jog someone's memory and uncover new leads. Meanwhile, a reward of £20,000 was announced for anyone with information that could help find Alice. In addition, recognizing the importance of the case and aiming to make further progress, the local police handed the file over to New Scotland Yard. As a result, over 600 officers from 8 different metropolitan police units were mobilized to expand the search. The search became extensive, covering 9 square miles of woodland and nearly 4 miles of waterways. Divers and search dogs were also deployed. After 28 days since Alice's disappearance, her mother was interviewed on BBC's Crime Watch, where she made another heartfelt appeal. A diagram showing Alice's final movements was also presented. The police considered several theories during the investigation into Alice Gross's disappearance and murder, and these theories evolved as new evidence emerged. First theory. Initially, the police thought Alice might have run away, leaving her backpack behind. However, the presence of her shoes in the backpack and the absence of money or spare clothes led them to dismiss this possibility. Second theory. The police also considered suicide, given her struggle with depression, possibly by drowning since she was near the River Brent when she sent her last text to her father, according to her phone data. Forensic experts, however, pointed out that if she had drowned, her body would likely have decomposed and floated to the surface by that time, making this theory less probable. Third theory, it was suggested that Alice might have fainted somewhere due to her anorexia, which made her prone to losing consciousness. Fourth theory, with most other theories appearing weak, the possibility of abduction became the most likely for the police. Over time, concern grew that someone might have been involved in her disappearance and may have switched off her phone to prevent tracking. As previously mentioned, the police obtained CCTV footage showing cyclists passing by the location where Alice was last seen. One of these cyclists was Arnie Zalkholms, who quickly became the prime suspect for several reasons. First, while reviewing the footage, police spotted a middle-aged man on a bicycle riding behind Alice over Trump's Way Bridge along the Grand Union Canal, just minutes after her last sighting. This man was Arnie's. Since Alice was walking, and he was cycling, it was certain that he would pass her at some point. Second, the route Alice took on the day of her disappearance intersected with the path connecting Arnie's home and his workplace. Third, upon further review of the CCTV footage showing Arnie's cycling along the same route as Alice, it was noted that his journey from one area to another on the bridge, passing the location where Alice was last seen, took an unusually long 45 minutes, despite the 2 points being very close. This unexplained delay led to the theory that he may have stopped, abducted Alice, and killed her. This period of delay occurred in the area immediately adjacent to the time and place of Alice's disappearance. Additionally, when Arnie's reappeared after this long delay, his pants were rolled up from the legs, suggesting he may have been in the water. Fourth, during the investigation, the police checked the missing persons database and discovered that Arnie Zalkons had also been reported missing. His colleagues reported that he had not shown up for work and had been absent since September 4th. Arnie's was not at work, not at home, and was not answering his phone. Fifth, additional CCTV footage showed Zalkons returning to the area where Alice was last seen twice within 12 hours, once in the evening of August 28th and again the morning of August 29th, wearing different clothes on one of the occasions. It was theorized that these repeated visits were an attempt to hide Alice's body. Sixth, another key piece of evidence was Arnie's criminal record. He had previously been convicted of killing his wife in Latvia and served 7 years in prison. After gathering all this information, the police issued a search warrant for Arnie Zalkons' home. He was not present during the search. The police dug up a patio that Zalkons had recently built in his backyard. Beneath the patio, they found the back panel of a white iPhone 4S, the same model and color as Alice's phone. Although it could not be confirmed that the panel belonged to Alice's phone due to the missing serial number, the police still considered it a strong circumstantial piece of evidence. In addition, all of Zalkons' electronic devices were seized. It was discovered that one of these devices had been used to search the internet for information about Alice Gross's disappearance just a few days after she went missing. These new findings significantly strengthened suspicions of Arnie's involvement in Alice's disappearance. 5 weeks after Alice Gross was last seen, on September 30th, 2014, her decomposed body was recovered from the River Brent near Hanwell, in water no more than 3 feet deep. Alice's body was found naked except for a single sock, positioned in a fetal position, and wrapped in several garbage bags. Her body had been weighed down with bricks and tree trunks and tied to a bicycle wheel in a clear and desperate attempt to prevent it from floating. Large tree trunks were also placed on top of her body to push it further into a shallow pit dug at the bottom of the river. The police also found DNA samples on the butt of a cigarette at the crime scene. Later analysis confirmed that the DNA belonged to Arnie Zalkons. As for the cause of death, initial examinations were inconclusive, but it was later determined that Alice died from asphyxiation due to sustained pressure on her chest. The official confirmation of Alice Gross's body being recovered came the very next day, on October 1st. For days after Alice's body was found, on October 3rd, 2014, Arnie's body was discovered in a secluded wooded area of Boston Manor Park in Hounslow, about 20 minutes from where Alice's body had been recovered. Arnie's had taken his own life by hanging. His body was heavily decomposed, indicating that he had been there for roughly a month. Arnie Zalkons, who had been intensely sought by the police as the prime suspect in Alice Gross's murder, had raised concerns that he might have fled the country and returned to Latvia. However, the police discovered that his passport and bank account had not been used, leaving his whereabouts a mystery. His reported disappearance on September 4, 2014, coincided with Alice's disappearance, further increasing police suspicions. After his body was found and further investigations linked his DNA to the crime scene, the police closed the case, confirming that had he been alive, he would have been charged with her murder. Arnie's was the prime suspect in Alice's case based on the evidence previously outlined. Moreover, the discovery of Alice's body provided sufficient proof of Zalkons' involvement. The evidence was extensive. The strongest was DNA evidence. A cigarette was found at the crime scene, near where Alice's body was discovered, containing Zalkons' DNA. His DNA was also found on Alice's shoes, which were inside her backpack. Another key piece of evidence was the garbage bags. The black bags used to wrap Alice's body matched rolls of bags seized from Zalkons' home. Then there was the iPhone back panel. As previously mentioned, during the search of Zalkons' property, investigators discovered a heavily damaged white iPhone 4S back panel buried under a patio he had recently built. Although the serial number was missing, it was considered strong circumstantial evidence. Based on all this, the police concluded that all evidence strongly indicated that Arnie Zalkons was responsible for Alice Gross's murder. As mentioned earlier, had he been found alive, he would have been charged with her murder. Based on CCTV footage, phone data, and forensic evidence, the police were able to reconstruct a chilling timeline of events. On August 28, 2014, Zalkulms was cycling home from work when he saw Alice walking a few meters ahead. He decided to attack her, cycling ahead and hiding among the bushes by the roadside, waiting for her to arrive. The police believe he smoked a cigarette during this time, the same cigarette later found with his DNA. After 4:25 p.m., the time Alice disappeared, Arnes allegedly attacked her, dragging her from the path into a secluded area, and then proceeded to kill her. Arnes then attempted to conceal the body. Police believe that after killing her, he returned several times to hide the body and dispose of her belongings or anything that could incriminate him. The rest of the events unfolded as previously described. In January 2015, the Crown Prosecution Service officially announced that, had Arnes Zalkulms been alive, he would have been charged with the murder of Alice Gross. The police concluded that he was solely responsible for her death. Alice, who was laid to rest on October 23, 2014, left a lasting impact, and her case sparked strong reactions. Her family launched awareness campaigns and strongly called for changes to prevent similar tragedies in the future. They tirelessly pushed for a review of policies and procedures regarding criminal record checks and background verification for people entering the United Kingdom. Alice's murder, combined with the significant pressure from her family, civil society activists, and the media, prompted the UK government to update its policies on criminal record checks for foreign nationals entering the country. Several measures were introduced, including increasing staff numbers at the Criminal Records Office, significantly raising the number of criminal record check requests for foreign suspects, with 80% now thoroughly examined, updating the Metropolitan Police policy to make comprehensive background checks, including international criminal records, mandatory when arresting any foreign national, implementing more efficient systems for international information sharing within Europe, although the UK's exit from the EU in 2020 complicated access to such information. A new data sharing system covering the EU, the UK, and other countries is currently being prepared. After Brexit, anyone wishing to live or work in the UK for extended periods is required to obtain a visa that includes comprehensive criminal record checks. The story of Alice Gross offers many lessons and takeaways, including, on a personal level, 1. Be cautious when moving alone. Even familiar and quiet places are not always safe, especially for children and teenagers. 2. Importance of communication with parents. Informing parents about plans and routes reduces risks and increases the chance of rapid intervention in emergencies. 3. Awareness of health conditions. Alice suffered from anorexia nervosa, highlighting the necessity of monitoring children and teenagers' physical and mental health. On a community and political level. 1. Importance of sharing criminal information between countries. The case exposed gaps in the EU criminal data sharing system, allowing a dangerous individual to move freely without monitoring. 2. Role of civil society and the media. Public and media pressure helped spotlight safety issues and child protection, leading to a review of immigration and security policies. 3. Cooperation between the police and the community. Participation from witnesses and citizens, such as reenacting Alice's route and using CCTV, was crucial for the investigation. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.